With me via telephone is a very talented individual. He's been in the world of Jewish music since he was a teenager. Started off in Toronto and it literally expanded from there. A composer extraordinaire, an arranger, a producer, and one of the ultimate choir masters everywhere. Please welcome to the show the one and only Yerachmiel Begun.
Shalom Aleichem, Yossi. How are you today?
Shalom Aleichem, Baruch Hashem. You know, Yerachmiel, I have to mention to you, a friend of mine got one of the old records. And he sent me a picture of a quote that I've never heard, but he says supposedly this was a quote that was said about you that I know it bothered you, but I've never heard it before. There's a picture of you. It said, a native New Yorker, Yerachmiel Begun, presently studying at the Ner Israel Yeshiva in Toronto. It was Toronto that he retreated 9 original compositions that was being introduced in the record. Yerachmiel said, it is said about Yerachmiel that he composes songs the way other people breathe.
Well, you know who wrote that?
I do not.
Back in the name of the person who produced the album was Heshi Nussbaum, and he lived in Toronto. He still lives there actually now. And I was in Israel in Toronto at the time,
right?
Because when I finished high school at Ner Yeshiva, a bunch of Bachrim were recruited to go out of town, so we went to Ner Israel in Toronto. Well, I was very friendly with Rabbi Eli Karaman, Zechatzak Levacha,
right?
And Eli was very friendly with Heshi Nussbaum, because him and Heshi Nussbaum had made the first original Perchei HaGudas Yisrael album back in 1968.
Right.
So what happened was, Eli, Rabbi Taraman knew, because I was close with him, that I had made a lot of songs. And I said to Eli, what am I going to do with these songs? So he says, well, there's a guy, Heshi Nussbaum in Toronto, and he, go speak to him. So I was in Toronto, and one day I just called the Heshi Nussbaum when I was in Toronto, went to his house, he heard the songs, I started singing new songs, at the table,
Right.
Like the Shabbos, just singing 20 songs, 30 songs, 40 songs. I just get this. So he says, you know what? You got good stuff. Let's put together a choir. So he put together the choir and he produced the album.
Right.
So every time I would get together with him, I would just sing more songs. In those days, there was no piano. There was no keyboard. I used to make up songs without a keyboard, just in my head. So he used to say to me, hey, Yerachmiel, you just make songs just like that. And just like that, just like every just walking around and making songs. I said, yeah. And so he was the one that came up with that line. So it was a little extreme, but
It was. But Yerachmiel, if you look throughout your history, especially when you did Miami Experience 3, and 4, when you went through the history of every project, every group you were involved in, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of songs.
Well, listen, it's one of those things where, people have natural talents, right? That the person can have a natural talent to be a carpenter and a plumber. I mean, it just comes natural. It's not something that I ever thought about, like, why am I able to do it?
Correct.
And obviously, it's just a gift that Kadosh Baruch Hu gave. After that point comes the hard work, right?
Correct. Especially after years go on, you have to. It's like learning the piano. There's a beginner learning piano, and then you hone your craft and you become an expert, and you go out and do concerts and you compose. You compose your own songs. Same thing with compositions. I'm sure the Yerachmiel Begun of today, had he heard some of the original songs, I guess that didn't make it on the albums, would be like, what was I thinking? Those songs were merely nothing.
Well, you're talking about the earlier albums, you mean?
No, I'm saying even the songs that didn't make the earlier albums, then you probably thought, why didn't he pick the song? Now, you're so honed as a composer, you're like, of course he didn't pick the song. There was nothing much to it. What was I thinking at the time?
Well, the real truth is that the songs that didn't make the album would be on some cassette somewhere, right? Because I used to record them onto a cassette.
Right.
I don't remember the songs in 1975 that I didn't use. It's not like I have copies of those cassettes and now I'm, listening back to old copies. I don't even have those cassettes,
Yeah.
So I don't remember the songs I didn't use, but the songs I didn't use didn't make it past the Shabbos table. I used to sing my songs to my parents and to my sister, and whatever they didn't like, I figured, okay, it's no good,
Right.
So I don't remember, having tapes of songs. I mean, I made, for every one song that got on the album in those days, there must have been 10 songs that didn't in the beginning. But later on, as the skill was honed to compose, I used to figure out myself if it wasn't so good. So, but even today with the new album, the new album Miami Forever that just came out, right?
Right.
There was at least another 20 songs in the running. There's always, so that, we're in the running and discussion, and something like that. But those are all, pretty good songs, but just the question was, what's best for this album.
So, Taka Yerachmiel, speaking of these other 20 songs, this is something that I've always wondered. Who is it that checks in and decides? Obviously, you and probably your wife, but do the other Begun family members, have a table-sided meeting and decide which songs are good enough to put on a Miami album?
Well, it doesn't exactly work that way, right? Because, I have songs that are in the running, so to say, right?
Right.
And at some point, I'll present those songs to my close family members and to a couple of people that I value their opinion, certain people out of the family as well. So, and I'll see what they have to say. I have my gut feeling of which ones I like. Sometimes I'm looking for confirmation of that gut feeling, and sometimes, it goes the other direction.
Right.
But at the end, I have to decide, what's going to make it, what's not.
Now, speaking about this process, Yerachmiel, so you have your songs that you think, are going to be making it on the album, you have a good feeling about. Now, for the first time ever, you've used other arrangers in the past, but this whole new group of arrangers, I believe this was the first time for you, Avrami Burkow, Naftali Schnitzler, Jan Frater, these are all new names for you. So I guess the question varies, once you had a feeling about a song and you handed it over to these new arrangers, is there anything that they did that surprised you, that changed the song, that you were like, wow, I didn't even think of doing that to it?
Well, listen, anybody that's been listening to Jewish music in the last 3-4 years, which I think it's about the last 3-4 years. I don't think it was 6 years ago. But anybody who's listening the last 3-4 years knows that most of the albums are being arranged by these young arrangers who have this more of an up-to-date sound, and also not using that many real instruments. It's a combination sometimes between real and between sampled software. They all have a very upfront driving sound, and they all have a contemporary feel. So I knew that already. I saw that coming when I did the last album, Up, which is three years ago. But I started that album a year before that. At that time, it wasn't so prevalent. Avrami Burkow wasn't even doing anything then.
Correct.
Ian Frater just started. Naftali Schnitzler was already started, but it wasn't that prevalent. So a lot of Suki Berry's kid, Yossi Berry, wasn't even around yet doing anything. So, and the same thing with other, such arrangers, young guys. So at that point, I debated with the if I should do that. I knew that these guys would give a contemporary, up-to-date sound. The only question was, I wanted Miami to remain authentic and to the what I felt was the neshama of the songs that I made.
Okay.
And the question was, how are those two things going to go together? Because a lot of the contemporary sounding arrangements, I felt possibly, didn't have the neshama of the Israel Lamb, the Moshe Laf, and the Mona Rosenblum.
Well, I can definitely hear that, right?
Right, and that to me was the challenge. The challenge was, how is that going to happen? And I knew that going into that, it was necessary to go this route. And the question was, how would I go about it, and how would it wind up?
Well, the fact that I'm looking at the book here and it says arranged by YB and Avrami Burkow, YB and Jan Frater, is the fact that you gave each arranger this speech saying, I want to update the sound while not throwing my values out the window and leaving the music, to be on the same wavelength of things that I've produced over the last 30 plus years. But I'm assuming you also, kind of guided them saying, I need it to sound like this, but, I need your help, so to speak.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. And Naftali Schnitzler, who's one of the arrangers on the album, is a very famous, arranger today.
Correct.
So he said to me one time, I was talking to him, I didn't even say anything to him. He said, listen, when I made these arrangements, I did it through Miami's, like he called it, the mind or the eye of Miami. Like I had it in mind. Like in his, that is, I didn't go too far over the line, and I had Miami in mind, what the past. I think these arrangers, I think to a degree, they sort of understood where it needed to go and where it couldn't go.
Right.
And that's what, and that was, a synthesis of these type of songs with that, and to be able to see how that would come out. So I think that they realized it, and that's why you won't hear you don't really hear some type of things that maybe you'll hear on other albums you didn't hear really on this album. So some sort of a combination. I think they understood that.
Yerachmiel Begun with us via telephone talking about the brand new Smash Miami album, L'Olam Va'ed Forever. In stores now, 13 amazing tracks, available on iTunes, everywhere Jewish music is sold. Yerachmiel, this is something that I've got time and time again from fans in the last few weeks, and David in Chicago just wrote this in, that the song Mugain seems to be directed to the nostalgic Miami fans. Was that the intention or not?
The song Mugain was basically an effort to try to go back. It's just to make a song that doesn't exist anymore in today's world. Mm-hmm. I mean, take the example of Kel HaKavod. How's Kel HaKavod go?
Kel HaKavod,
Which album? Which album, Yossi?
I think B'Siyata D'Shmaya, I'm not sure.
B'Siyata D'Shmaya, right. Now, that type of a song, that type of a freilach, right, which is the yeshiva freilach,
right,
doesn't exist today. The type of freilachs that exist today are mostly Hasidish, right? So it was an effort to try to go back, not so much to say, well, here's something to remember the past. It was sort of to try to fill in a spot that perhaps the Olam consciously or subconsciously really still needs.
Interesting.
And I know that I would like those type of songs. Mm-hmm. In those days, myself, Yossi Green, and a few of the composers, we used to make those type of songs back in the 80s and 90s, and those type of songs disappeared.
Right.
So, Magen Mashiach is a type of a song saying, hey, listen, no matter how things are going today, there's still makom for that. I mean, you go to a Jewish wedding, you go to a frum wedding, the first dance there is still Freilich, right? Mm-hmm. And then after that, it goes into everything else. So the point is, there's still makom for that. The only thing is you need to give them a song that perhaps they'll be easy and catchy, and at the same time, maybe a little bit of an arrangement that's not straight Freilich, a little bit of a twist. So that was the idea of that song. It wasn't saying, oh, I wish that we went back to 1980s. I mean, that's not what the concept was.
No, it's good. Definitely something we asked. Listener Gedalia Levin from Australia wrote in here a bunch of questions. One of the questions was also a question I had. 3 songs feature only soloists and no choir. How does Yerachmiel go about choosing which songs will be presented in this way without the full choir?
Did he say 3?
He said 3 songs feature only soloists. I believe.
No,
on the
album.
Yeah.
There's 2. There's 2 on the album.
Tairas Chaim and Tfilat.
And Tfilat Chuppah.
Right.
Or Tfilat Chuppah, however you want to pronounce it. Right.
Okay. So,
well, he's asking, how do I go about?
How do you go about choosing which songs you don't even feature the choir, even in a little bit of a background vole? It's totally soloist. You've done this very few times over the years, I've noticed. You have done it in the past, but not very often, and definitely not twice on one album.
The only other time recently that I can remember that I did it was on the Yavai album.
Right.
The last song was called Azarina, and Azarina was sung by Yair Koenig at the time. Mm-hmm. But I don't remember, trying to remember back through all the albums, that I really took a regular song in Hebrew and did it. I think what happened on this album was that there were certain songs that I felt that emotionally could only be brought across by a solo. I think it has to do with the song, the way the song is constructed. Now, it could have been done by a choir, but just certain songs felt interpretive-wise that a solo would do a better job. That's number one. Number two, you have a 13-song album, just for the sake of variety, to be able to have some songs that the choir just doesn't sing every song. But I tell you, on this album specifically, because the talent of the solos is high,
right,
and they're Kanai Nahara, the whole choir as a whole is extremely talented, but there's a lot of individual great solo voices. It lent itself more to have some songs being done only by soloists.
Mm-hmm. Yerachmiel Begun with us via telephone, talking about Miami's brand new smash hit album, L'Olam Va'ed Forever. 13 amazing songs, all composed by the one and only Yerachmiel Begun, with arrangements by Yerachmiel Begun, Naftali Schnitzler, Jan Freda, Yisrael Lam. Yerachmiel, you've worked with Yisrael Lam a lot in the past. I mean, do you feel that he still has a 2018 sound in arrangements? This has been a question of a lot of people in the field, that they're all going to all these newer Udi Damari or Ravid Kashti. Does Yisrael still have what it takes in 2018?
It's an interesting question. I feel that, what's missing, the only thing that the old arrangers are missing is the ability to create these rhythms in software. Mm-hmm. In other words, when you talk about Naftali Schnitzler and Benny Burko, these guys are very, very talented. And they're also keyboard players.
Correct.
And they also are, in their computers, they have the best software. Mm-hmm. And they have the best rhythms they can create. And they learned that. They spent a long time. But Yisrael Lam didn't learn that part. It doesn't mean he couldn't, but that's not his thing. But Yisrael Lam, if he theoretically went and learned that and went and worked on that in theory, mm-hmm. I think that his combination would be unbelievable because he would have the best of both worlds. So, the fact is that the Laufers and the Lambs and the Monas are not going to go learn that, but that's something that's yet to be heard.
Correct.
And that's something that I, even on this album, I wanted to do that with Yisrael, but it wasn't yet possible. But I think that's something to look forward to down the line.
I actually was thinking, I've been thinking a lot of your career. I've been listening. I mean, you know me, I'm a music fan for many, many decades. As a matter of fact, now on the way home to Montreal for Pesach, we were going through Miami Experience 2 with Bia Mensch and whatnot, and my kids were, hearing it for the first time, and they were loving it. They were asking me to play it again and again. Now, Yerachmiel Begun of 1979. If the Yerachmiel Begun of 2018 had a conversation with the Yerachmiel Begun of 1979, and he heard this album, I mean, you were always somebody who looked to the future. You want to always do what's next. I mean, first of all, what would Yerachmiel 1979 say about this album? Have you stuck to your values? Would he still think that Miami would still be on their, 30th or 40th album at this time? What do you think, Yerachmiel?
I think from the point of the songs, 100%. Mm-hmm. I think that from the point of the songs, that's the starting point,
Correct.
That's the starting point. So I think from the point of the songs, yeah, for sure. But stylistically, at those days, we didn't even have a techno song. We didn't have a disco song. We didn't have a rock song. We didn't have those type of beats. But from the point of neshama and from the point of where the songs emanate from, where the songs come from, I would say it's from the same source. The difference is how it's really brought across,
right?
How it's composed differently because of the styles make you compose a little differently, mm-hmm. and the way it's wrapped up in what kind of package.
Correct. But did you think then that you'd be doing this almost 40 years later, Yerachmiel? Truthfully, I'm curious.
Then you should ask the question the other way. If the 2018 Yerachmiel Begun had a chance to speak to this 1979 Yerachmiel Begun, what would he tell him? That's go the other way.
That's my follow-up. That's my next question. You got ahead of me. So tell me, Taka, if 2018 could tell 1979 something, what advice would he offer?
Well, a person is in the line that he's in because he's in the line. I don't think I would say to him to become to do something else. You're in this line because you're in the line. Mm-hmm. That's where you are. But I don't. We could always be smarter later, right?
Right.
And figure out the Monday morning quarterback on sets of decisions. So I guess I would tell him. You talk about going back in a time machine,
Right.
Well, make this decision, don't make that decision. But overall, I don't think I can advise him, that much differently.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting. Yerachmiel Begun with us via telephone. Another question we got in here, Yerachmiel, and I agree with this question too, which is why I'm bringing it up to you. Never Give Up has got to be the most atypical Miami song ever. What is the story behind it?
Wow. The story behind the song. I tell you the truth.
Yes.
I don't remember the story behind it.
Mamish?
Because I made up the song probably a year before the album came out, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't remember the story. Not always is there a story behind the song, but what's meant by the song. But I can't tell you, what inspired me to make the song. I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you that the year before this album came out, was Miami's 40th anniversary.
Correct.
1977 to 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And with all the different concerts that we did that year, which is a year ago, with the Miami 40 concerts, and we brought back all those songs, I'm sure that somewhere along the way, somebody must have said to me, "Oh, Yerachmiel, 40 years, amazing. Keep going, never give up." Maybe somebody said those words or didn't. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But this album is sort of like an outgrowth of the Miami 40, and it sort of says, okay, it's been over 40 years now. Where do we go now?
Interesting.
So that's a little bit, perhaps, is in the soup, like they say.
Mm-hmm. Yerachmiel Begun with us via telephone. We're talking about Miami's brand new smash album, the one and only La'olam Va'ed Forever, available through Niggin Music, iTunes, Amazon Music, Google Play. So Yerachmiel, in the last few weeks, we've seen an explosion of videos, and not only the Miami Boys Choir Facebook page, but now Twitter and Instagram. Looks like Miami Boys Choir is coming into the 2018's very, very strong. Does this mean that there will finally be a YouTube channel for Miami Boys Choir with brand new music videos coming out?
Well, those are three separate statements. One is you mentioning all the different social media.
Correct.
Number two, you're asking about a YouTube channel. Well, there is a Miami Boys Choir channel that got created this time around because of the countdown,
Countdown, and of course the last two show promos you have on the channel as well, correct?
So whatever, right? Just started now,
mm-hmm.
and sort of I've been schlepped into the 2018 social media world, So therefore, once the idea was, the concept was presented, that I had to step into the social media world,
Mm-hmm.
So I figured once we're doing it, got to do it to some degree, right?
Correct.
And so that's where that came about. We are working on, actually we shot it already, a new music video, which we never really put out a real music video. We only put out, when the CM calls, we did a little bit something then.
Correct.
And,
you had videos that were created over the years, but they were either shown in concerts or featured on DVDs, kind of speak. They were never
right.
Right.
Well, I came from the world of, do a music video from the concert, and you put that out, and we have 13, 14 DVDs on the market, right?
Correct.
But now, as a separate song, as a separate music video, we just shot it actually 2 Sundays ago,
mm-hmm.
and it's going to take time to put together and to edit it. So we will have a music video out with the Shem Bakarov.
Very, very excited about that. Listener Tzvi wants to know if Yerachmiel will ever put his old albums on Spotify.
Well, listen, I think that there will come a time that the old albums will be available to streaming, which is actually you're talking about, some sort of a streaming situation.
Correct.
I think that might come about. I'm not sure if it will happen on Spotify, but I think it will happen Bakarov.
Well, very excited about that. I guess that means it might happen one of the Jewish apps, like the what's it called, Shira Lee or something like that.
I don't know, but the Jewish music field is different.
Correct.
And the Goyish field, in so many ways, and so it has to be handled. It has to be handled differently, but we'll see.
Right. If you have a son or a friend or somebody that would like to join the Miami Boys Choir, for auditions, please email mbcauditions@aol.com. And for booking and information, please email shirenu@gmail.com. That's SHIRAINU events@gmail.com. Yerachmiel, before we let you go, I still have to ask you about this Tfilat Chuppah. I'm so inspired and awed by, Miami doing a all Ivrit song. I mean, I know you had Hebrew before, but never, to me, I don't remember you ever did anything kind of like this.
Well, Tfilat Chuppah, I call it Tfilat Chuppah, so you call it Tfilat. I don't really call it that. The song is not in Ivrit, it's just in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
You need to say, it's just a Pisgon, or Pismon, I think it's called Pismon, sorry, that I found online of a tefillah that was a tefillah for a chuppah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just beautiful, inspiring words, and really that are very special. I mean, you'd have to read the words to everybody so they would hear it.
Okay.
And it's just basically Hebrew. It's not Ivrit at all. It's Hebrew, and it just was the once I saw the words, I knew that a song could be composed to that with that feeling. So it was it was just a very, very special tefillah.
Mm-hmm. And the fact, of course, that we didn't mention, you have all these arrangers, but we didn't discuss the fact that you have Zmir's group on the album, very famed choir that, of course, you've actually featured at many of your concerts in the last few years.
Listen, the album always, needs to have an adult choir. And Zmir's has been doing a lot of albums, and they have an up-to-date feel. And harmonically, they have a good feel for harmonies and working together with them, and putting them on the album at certain spots, was able to complement the Miami sound. So they did a fine job.
Yerachmiel, it's going to be a long summer. I know I'm very excited about the upcoming video and anything new Miami. I guess I would tell all of our listeners, if you do want to know when that video is coming out, I would suggest that they go over to your Miami Boys Choir YouTube channel and subscribe. This way, when the video is loaded, they'll be notified right away. Correct, Yerachmiel?
I guess so. You know social media better than I do.
I'd like to wish you Hatzlacha Rabbah, an amazing summer. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm looking forward to more. We're going to play you out with Esmach, track 1. Is there any story or anything that happened while recording this that you can let our listeners know about before we let you go, Yerachmiel, or not?
It was just an inspired song. It was made up in the summer of last summer, and Esmach Bashem says it all. That's what we have to do.
And the song was arranged by you and the talented Avrami Burkow.
That's correct.
Yerachmiel, have an amazing summer. Hatzlacha Rabbah, very, very excited for the new album.
Great. Thank you, Yossi. Hatzlacha.
Take care. Well, you heard it. Here is Miami Boys Choir, Yerachmiel Begun, Esmach, off the brand new album, L'Olam Va'ed, Forever. And you, my friends, are tuned into the Z Report Live, Jewish Entertainment Network, Scoop Radio.